Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, back with the number one investor in Fresno, California, Jason Pritchard. How you doing, sir?
I am doing great. Zuber, how are you?
I'm doing well. So one of the things I love about you is your business model is changing, evolving, right? You did wholesaling, then you flipping, you built a rental portfolio. And here recently you started doing Airbnbs in Fresno, California. What the hell do people need Airbnb in Fresno,
That's
California for?
exactly what I saw 2 or 3 years ago. And that was the thought that was running through my head for the last couple of years. And I was like, why in the heck would anybody want to rent an Airbnb in Fresno? Like, who's even coming down here? And so I've got some insight because I actually, before I ever flipped a house or bought a rental property, my kind of very first foray into real estate investing was renting a room out of one of my old houses on Airbnb. And this was like back in 2014, 15, 16.
Oh, wow.
And I was just looking to hustle up some extra money. And that was it, really. And I was the cleaner. I was the guy like messaging everybody. I had no real estate experience, and literally I was just trying to make a few extra bucks, and I saw this thing and I was able to convince my wife that this was a good idea. And it was another example of Jennifer really supporting me. And really,
you two are perfect together.
Yeah, she is. She just lets me, she doesn't ever put brakes or anything on me, man. And so we did that for about a year and a half, and I was a super host and we had a bunch of reviews, and my HOA actually found out about the Airbnb listing. And they sent me this big old packet saying like, hey, we just realized that you're doing this and you can't do it anymore. And I was kind of done with it anyways, because the flipping business was starting to take off. And I was like, I'm not going to do this to make like $150 a month. I think
there's a better ways to go.
Exactly. So I stopped doing it. And then, fast forward maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. Right. And I'll use Kyle, a friend of ours, as an example. So Kyle started to grow his Airbnb portfolio out here.
Yeah.
And I was even skeptical at that point. And I had Kyle come and speak at one of my meetups.
Yeah.
And I was seeing a couple other people that I knew and that I respected that were also kind of ramping up their Airbnb business. Right. And it took Kyle and a couple of these other guys that I was close with that I respected. And I started just seeing them and having kind of side conversations with them. And I was like, wow, they're doing very well. This could be something that has some potential. COVID hits, right? We were very fortunate that we only really had 2 or 3 tenants that kind of just stopped paying us during COVID. And this was out of like, at that point, maybe 70 something long-term units. So our overall, our rental portfolio performed very well. But we had one house where I had bought it. I had spent a significant amount of money fixing it up. We had put these tenants in there and they stopped paying right around the time, right after COVID hit. And we got no money from it for about a year until we were finally able to get and secure an eviction. And I went in there and it was just such a disheartening feeling. Like I walked in, they had left like 7 dogs on the property and they were living in the property after. And so the dogs I felt really bad for the dogs. They had kind of torn up the house. The house was just destroyed. And I felt like, hey, we had done a great job buying this property. We had just secured an awesome deal. The market had already appreciated. I had already secured long-term permanent financing, 30-year fixed financing at like 4.5% on this thing. So my payment on it's like $900. And I was like, let's clean it up. Let's throw a few bucks into the house and furnish it. And let's just see how it performs. And this was about 18 months ago. And it was a cool summer project for me and Jen to do. It was a fun thing. And I was like, let's just try it. Worst case scenario, if it doesn't work, we can always turn it into another rental property. And we listed it on Airbnb and it did great. And I was very surprised. And that was the start of the first one. And then I intentionally then bought a couple other ones. One of them that I've sent to you, and I think we've done a walkthrough video on it. That was one of the best deals that I bought last year. I had a huge margin on it. And I was like, hey, let's keep it. It's a really nice neighborhood. We turned that one into one. We've got a third one. And now we have 3 listed right now. And then we're working on the 4th one, getting that one ready to go to.
Very cool. So you've had an Airbnb units for 18 months now? At least one?
Maybe a little bit less than that. Maybe, yeah, let's just call it 12 to 18 months, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us about the business of Airbnb in Fresno, looking back at a year, because I think for a lot of people, this is my fear and you have them. So again, I'm coming to you because you can tell me where I'm wrong.
Sure.
I think a lot of people were watching the Kyles of the world, right? And they see the success he has. Kyle Stanley has a great page. He does Airbnbs. I've had him on the show. But what I'm starting to see is people are copying that, but down selecting, right? if you have the right inventory, kind of the Class A stuff put together, awesome. But I see too many people coming in, and the market's getting flooded with Airbnbs of less quality and less
Yep.
location.
Correct.
And most importantly for me, and why this could be a problem, is people are now buying stuff where it only makes sense as an Airbnb. It doesn't have the backup of a long-term rental. So tell us about the business. Has it gone up, down, softening? What's going on in the business?
So it's very interesting. It was from, I'd say like early spring of last year when we listed our first one, right?
Yep.
We would just stick the properties on there and literally not have to do anything. It would just, they would book themselves. We would get these long-term bookings. We would get nurses. We would get, construction workers, guys that would come that would normally stay like at Extended Stay Americas, right? Their owner would call us and say, hey, we've got 3 or 4 guys. We're going to have them there for 6 weeks because they're fixing, some big commercial job. And it was just great. And we were generating on that same property, that very first one, before those tenants, we ended up having to evict them. We were generating about $1,400 a month if it's a 3-bed, 2-bath in, I'd say maybe a B- neighborhood here in Fresno. Not really great location, but not a bad location either. And we were getting $3,000, $3,500. I think our biggest month, we got like $4,000 in gross revenue on that thing. Yeah. And we only have about, I'd say $650 to $750 in additional expenses to use it as an Airbnb, right? So that's our utilities, PG&E, Comcast for Wi-Fi, yard service, all of those things. So when you add all of those things up, it tacks on about another $650 to $750. So my payment was about $900. We tack on about $650 worth of expenses, and we're generating in a really good month $3,500 to $4,000, right? And so, and here's the other good thing that I really liked, and this actually made me feel really good about that property, is our cleaner would be in there every time we're in between guests, right? As soon as there's an issue, we know about it. I remember walking in there about 3 or 4 months after we listed it, and it was just immaculate. It looked exactly like it looked when we had first furnished it, right?
Nice.
And it just made me feel good. It felt like we were doing the right thing by our asset, and it was performing better, and we're not entering into tenant-landlord relationships with these tenants. And all the things that it kind of drew me to an Airbnb, we were just checking every single one of those boxes. I was like, this is great, right? Nice. So fast forward to, I'd say May of this year, I think Airbnb made some type of change to their algorithm. And I don't want to act like an expert and know exactly what they did, but there was some changes to their platform. And we started seeing a drop in occupancy, not like a falling off the cliff, but just for whatever reason, we had already achieved Superhost, all the things that we needed to do. We had our pricing and stuff set up, but we started seeing occupancy go down in May, and May underperformed compared to everything else.
Okay.
I started reaching out to guys like Kyle and other people that I know, these other guys that I was looking at, and they were saying, similar to what you said, we're starting to see a lot of oversaturation in this market, right? So a year ago, right, to now, I think there was something like 400 additional Airbnb properties, right?
Yeah.
So everybody had kind of jumped on the bandwagon, right? And so we're seeing, some oversupply in some of these things. So there's going to be more competition. And I think all of the fears that you're seeing from inflation and the news and gas prices and all these things that are uncertainty that's happening with the economy, I think one of the first things that goes away is your travel budget, right? And so, you're going to see that not just from, your kind of families that are going and taking those day trips to go see family or Yosemite or whatever it is, but also corporations are not just sending guys all over the place, right? And so I think we're a culmination of all of those things, right? And then our last month in June was our worst month ever for a couple of different reasons, right? Some of the stuff was outside of our control. We had some very big capital expenses. We had an AC go out. We had a water heater go out. We had a water pipe burst under one of the properties. All of that stuff happened in June. So we had about $6,000 in capital expenses. Plus we had to shut our properties down for, 3-4 days at a time to get all those things done. And then we also started to see occupancy just drop even more. And so we rallied the troops and we started making some adjustments, and we can get into some of what are the adjustments that we started making. And July, I'm very happy to say, has been our best month ever. We've outperformed even the other months going into it.
Wow.
And so we'll see if we can keep that trend going. But I think we had to be smart and nimble on our feet, right? And this is one of the drawbacks of Airbnb, is that once you stick a long-term tenant in there and they do good and they're performing, it isn't just set it and forget it, but there isn't kind of this day-to-day management that you have to have. And with Airbnb, you kind of really got to be looking at this almost every single day, and or at least have your team looking at it, right? And that's what we've done. And so you know, it's good to see that we pivoted, but we'll, you know,
So as the business owner, you're the puppet master, right? Kind of above all, and you have so much stuff going on. So you probably get a report about June and you're like, ooh, ouch. That's not what I expected, right? June was a bad month.
Yep.
So talk about a couple of things that you did when you rallied the troop. Did Jason Pritchard call an Airbnb meeting and say, all right, guys, what's going on? What do we change? What was it that focused?
So just so the audience has an understanding of how we run and operate ours, right? I have one full-time in-person employee that works for me that manages all of our long-term rentals, and he also oversees our short-term rentals.
Okay.
We have one full-time virtual assistant that is like his right-hand woman that handles basically anything that can be done from a phone or a computer for either the long-term or short-term rentals. She takes care of all of that. And that is a big component of this business. All of the messaging with the guests, all of the changing of the smart lock codes, all the scheduling of the cleaners and the handyman and the maintenance and all. She really does that virtually from the Philippines. And then our cleaner, which is probably, you know, if not the biggest component, one of them, she's our eyes and ears on the property. She's the one that's in there turning them. And it's really that 3-person team. And so I meet with my 2 employees once a week just to discuss our long-term and our short-term rental business. And we're constantly keeping tabs on this. So, you know, we split that meeting in half. Half the meeting talks about our long-term rentals, half of them talks about our short-term rentals, and we look at the performance. We pull the calendars up and we see what's our occupancy looking like, what's our pricing looking like, what are some of the issues that we need to get out in front of, and that type of stuff, and constantly trying to tweak and optimize the business. And so I'm fortunate that it's not just me, right? And I think I got into this business knowing that there's no way that I'm going to do this if Jason is responsible for managing and running these things, because you're literally running a hotel business. You're getting requests, you're getting inquiries, you're getting people saying, hey, I want to book and I have this question. How far are you from Yosemite? How far are you from this? And I just would not have the time or the inclination to want to do that myself. And so I knew going into it that I had to build a team around that.
Yeah. So what was 1 or 2 things you guys did in that meeting to kind of make June into July?
A couple things. And so one of the things that we decided to do was we decided to start allowing guests to stay with pets. And and so we noticed that there were not a lot of, even though the number of Airbnbs have grown, there is just not a lot of Airbnbs that allow pets. When we've remodeled all of our properties, we try to do it in a way where we harden the property, right? So there's no carpet in any of the bedrooms, right? It's all waterproof vinyl flooring or tile in the wet areas and really throughout the entire house. There's throw rugs here and there, but there's not things that we're gonna, have to rip out and do again. If anything, if a pet destroys one of the carpets, we can just roll it up, throw it out, and just go to Home Goods and buy another one type of thing, right? So we've been very fortunate, and we've seen an uptick in not just reservation requests, but longer term ones. And I don't know how those 2 things are correlated, but 5, 7, 10, 2 weeks at a time, right? With guests. So that's been very good for us. And then the other thing, I talked to a buddy of mine that's in a mastermind that I'm in called Investor Fuel. And he's got, I think, 40 or 50 short-term rental properties in Sacramento and Vegas. And he suggested, even though we use a program called Price Labs to help us with the pricing algorithm, so it kind of pays attention to the prices and everything that's going on in your market, and it gives you suggestions. He suggested that we go in and tweak the pricing almost daily, right? And we had to bring it down a little bit just to kind of figure out what the bottom is, right? So if we just don't have an occupancy, I told my team, I was like, we're not gonna run it at a net negative, but we've got to bring it down. So if we can't make $4,000 a month, I'd rather make $3,300 a month. It's better than $0, right? And so we started doing these daily tweaks, and again, I'm not a tech expert, but what he told me was that so many people have joined the platform, so many people are using these pricing softwares that for whatever reason, the algorithm kind of bulks everybody into this one group. And in order for your listing to get more visibility in the searches, I guess the algorithm likes to see the price kind of getting tweaked, right? And it's not just how fast can we get to the bottom, it's $5 down one day, then maybe $5 up, then $10 down, then $5. You know what I mean? And so it's just keeps us in this range, but it helps us get more visibility. And July has been really good. It's been the best month from From a revenue standpoint, we've generated more gross revenue this
That's
month. And
awesome.
we've still got a week left. And so we'll see, we'll see.
So the big question for me is, Jason going to add 2 or 3 more Airbnbs this year, or you're done with 4?
We are adding, we're adding this 4th, and then we're going to kind of just wait and see. And so here is the advice for anybody that's kind of on the fence, right? And is thinking about this. Number 1, I will not buy a property and turn it into a short-term rental unless the numbers pencil as a long-term rental. They have to be able to switch it back, right? We have to be able to say, you know what, we can pull the plug on this, we can pivot. And I feel very, very confident, especially with the rental demand in our market, right? That I know where the rents are at, that if I had to, just to be able to make this thing perform, I could always switch it into a long-term rental. So that's number 1. Number 2, we are only buying properties at a substantial discount. So even when we buy it, we fix it up, we furnish it, we're still only all in for about 70 to 75% of what the after repair value of that property is. So if I just said, you know what, I just want to liquidate these properties, right? The last guest that checks out, we could go clean that property. We already take professional photos from when, we stick it on Airbnb. I could the very next day stick it on the market, sell it, and still make money. So I have a number of different backup plans and exit strategies where I could, worst case scenario, break even if I needed to, but I'd be very confident that I could make money. And so I think the thing that scares me the most about this big kind of rush into the short-term rental investing strategy is people are buying at the very top. The only way that property can pencil is if they use it as a short-term rental. They've got a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 cash outlay at the beginning on top of the purchase to furnish the property, right? So it's going to take them a year or so to recoup that money. And God forbid the market turns, you're not going to be able to sell at anything that you bought in the last 6 months. You're not selling at that price, right? We've already kind of peaked and we've cooled off. So you're gonna take a hit on not just the purchase price, but also what your furnishing costs are and your make ready costs are. And that can be a tough pill to swallow for the people that are not capitalized right. And I worry about the ones that are just getting started, and this is the only way to make the deal viable, right? And so
not the time. I'm so glad you brought that up. Again, I think Airbnbs and short-term rentals are a way to go, but you can't buy them where if you're buying a property and you need 80% occupancy to make money, that's your only option. Not run away. Not yet.
Yeah, and I would say people that are buying into the people like Kyle, and I have a couple other buddies out here that have similar management business or own a big portfolio. They've suggested that we pencil our stuff out at 65%. So if you can make the numbers work around 60-65% occupancy, then you're going to be safe. Now that's going to depend on your market and your location and all these other things, right? But that's just kind of a safe number to be at, right? If you're banking at 80-85%, I would say you are exposing yourself to some risk.
Yeah, the downside is greater than the upside.
100%.
Jason, do me a favor. Where can people follow you?
You can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. If you just pop my name in there, Jason Pritchard, you'll be able to see this stuff. I share very openly about what we're doing, our process with these things. I'm constantly talking in my stories about the current one, because the one that we have right now is under construction, and I'm very open about numbers and how we do all this stuff. So if you have any questions about that, your audience does, tell them to reach out.
Yeah. So again, follow Jason Pritchard on Instagram today. His stories are something to watch. I look at him every day. And also he does walkthrough videos on this channel. There's a playlist called Walkthroughs. He's done several for us. So go check him out. And again, he gives you all the numbers. So have fun with it. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.